Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cubic Dimensions. As always, this is Matt here, but for simplicities, we're probably going to be calling me Cuby. We have Christian joining, as always. Christian, if you want to say hi.
Hi. Hello, everybody. How's it going?
And we have a special guest who is not named Jessica, is actually named Matt Terry.
Hi.
Matt Terry was the Democratic nominee for state representative in the Massachusetts 5th Barnstable District 2 years ago, and I interned on his campaign then. And Matt has so graciously blessed us with his presence on the program tonight.
I'll do what I can.
All right, so let's jump right into it. So first thing leading the news this week, obviously, is that, as some people have been rather incorrectly reporting, the FBI has quote-unquote reopened the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. Now, what actually happened was that they're really just looking into some discrepancies because her top aide, Huma Abedin, who happens to be married to Anthony Weiner, they both use the same computer, and there's some just some sort of discrepancy there. It's not that big, honestly. It's not like they're completely reopening and this is becoming a whole new investigation as the Republicans are trying to make it out to be. But yeah, any thoughts, Christian, if you want to go first?
Sure. Wow, just so you know, there's some echo with you. I don't know what you're thinking about that. But anyway, that's the point. Not going to point out. So what I found, what I'm feeling with this is, I don't know to what degree it's actually true. There's been a big swing in the polls since this came out, but I read that somewhere, I saw that. But I feel as if there's a coalition of these undecided voters, and this is a theory I had after seeing that. And, you know, they're like middle-aged, maybe a bit older people, and they aren't very, like, tied to any party, but there's some comfort in the thought that both parties are very much the same. It's like, harkens back to an earlier era, I guess, in their minds, where there wasn't a big difference in between the left and right in American culture. And you didn't have this big political divide. So in their head, they will look for any excuse that will make them feel as if both parties are the same, or that no party is better than the other, because there's something comforting in that thought. And I think this is a nice thing for them in a way, just because it shows that, you see, Hillary Clinton wasn't, there was something in the emails. Hillary Clinton wasn't better than Trump. At the end of the day, really, this is all just played up. Both parties are the same. I sort of came to that theory when I saw some people on the art website I'm on were posting journals, and they were like, yeah, you got that feeling from a lot of these independent or, like, you know, unaligned voters you would see making their posts. That's really what they felt or wanted to feel. I don't know what you think about that. Maybe that's completely not where you thought I would go, but that's what I was thinking.
It's definitely not what I expected.
Yeah.
Matt, do you have any thoughts?
On the polling, Nate Silver had an interesting piece this evening that basically said it's still too early to try to read the tea leaves in the polls and see if the story's having any impact. They've only had essentially a day in the field, and based on very little data, you know, it seemed like there were some polls that were shifting Trump's direction, some that were shifting Hillary's direction, and a bunch that were staying pat. I mean, to me, the email issue, it doesn't really matter kind of what the substance of it is, because, and we may not know the substance between now and Election Day. It's really more about perception, as is so many things with politics. And the perception, you know, when things came out on Friday, it was real bad initially. And I think, you know, the media all the way across the political spectrum kind of got it wrong. You know, you had mentioned in your intro, Matt, you know, a lot of people are incorrectly saying that the case is being reopened. And that was, you know, one of the milder mistakes that were made, I think, as the story broke. And I was watching the Sunday shows this morning, and the hyperbole is still on there, with respect to what we actually know. And in that sense, it's a lot like other breaking news stories that, we see outside of the political realm, where initial information is nearly always incorrect. But nevertheless, we kind of dove headlong into the story. And so it becomes about that perception. It was labeled an October surprise. And so whether the substance of it is actually surprising or would move the needle is sort of irrelevant. I mean, I think my armchair take sitting here on Sunday night is that I don't think it certainly is not going to cost Hillary the election. I think the trend lines for her were already moving in a bad direction, or a less favorable direction for her before Friday, as kind of on the fence Republican voters started to come home a little bit. Some the undecideds were making up their mind, and it looked like Trump was taking a % or 2 from Johnson voters as well. So Hillary's trend lines were already heading in a bad direction. The race, I think, was already tightening a little bit. So I think we're talking about going from a landslide to a comfortable victory, and kind of depending on how the next 10 days breaks, and whether there are substantively hurtful evidence that comes out with Hillary on the email thing, it could go from a comfortable race to a close Clinton victory. And my one last thought is that the Senate may end up actually being a lot closer or staying in Republican hands, because I think that the Senate polls have kind of been trailing Clinton and Trump's polls, and you start to see an impact a few days later. So I think that in those half dozen Senate races that are going to decide control of the Senate, the email issue and the sort of general natural race tightening may keep the Senate in Republican hands.
Yeah, I both of you make very good points, but before I get to that, I just want to say real quick. So this was broke, if you want to say, by Congressman Jason Chaffetz. And can we just appreciate that his Twitter handle is Jason in the House?
Sure.
That's just so dumb. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, I think we're less than 2 weeks out. Elections typically close around this time, so I don't see why people are making so much hay about this, especially when this is such a divisive election. People have already made up their minds, and this goes for any election. You just as you get close to election day, more people make up their minds, and I think I saw somewhere, I want to say it was the New York Times, 68% of voters will not change their mind on their vote for or against Hillary because of this, and that doesn't surprise me in the least. I mean, we're covering this because it's relevant. I'm just asking why it's relevant.
Well, I think part of it is the desire to cover the horse race, right? I mean, it's that before Friday, the storylines had gotten awfully stale, right? So, not just the media, but also the consumers of media were kind of resigning themselves to the status quo for the final 14 days or so of the election. So everybody's jumping at the bit to try to inject a new storyline in, especially if it's one that you can couple with a tightening election.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very, Yet another story that really brings to light how depressing the horse race aspect of an election is.
Right.
All right. Well, does anybody have any final words?
No, I think we've given this all it deserves.
All right. Well, next, Christian, would you mind explaining South Korea insanity?
Okay, so this one really came out of nowhere on me. So South Korea's President Park Geun-hye, I don't speak Korean, is the daughter of the last dictator of South Korea. Random fact. So anyways, she had a friend in the 70s, Chua Soon-sil, and they were buddies. Anyways, so we come fast forward about 2000, I think 13. She was elected, maybe 2014. She's president, and there was this conspiracy theory that her childhood friend, Chua, was part of a secret society of women called the Eight Goddesses, and they were, secretly, and they indoctrinated the President Park into this like secret society, and they were like controlling the levers, and something to that effect. And, crazy conspiracy theory. That was until emails were leaked that suggested this was true. And then it finally all came to a head 3 days ago when the South Korean president came out and she confirmed this conspiracy theory as true and apologized on state television. So apparently the cult is some like shady pseudo-Christian kind of affair. Yeah. So anyways, as you can imagine, there's calls for the president to resign. There's been large protests over the last few nights in South Korea over this. All of it's just so weird. It's just such a weird story.
Yeah. What? Just what? This seems something like it seems something out of like Indiana Jones or something like that.
Right.
Like next thing you know, you're gonna find her like in her house, and she's gonna be like sacrificing lambs to these people. It's like, what?
Like a Stanley Kubrick film.
Yeah, pretty much.
Exactly. Gonna find her on an island in 200 years, saying, "I will live forever."
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it seems like a lot of it boils down to like your regular kind of corruption, where she's been like, she's effectively giving preference to members of this cult, and she's been like following the more hardline conservative policies a lot of the members like. Such as they had a joint factory with North Korea that they were running that was sort of supposed to try and get them to work together on something. And she shut that down after a few years of it running successfully. So all very, as I titled it, insane. It's just so weird. Out of left field.
Yeah. I just don't know what to say about that. That's just so. Like, we have don't get me wrong, we have our own problems with our presidential candidates, obviously. And, one way or the other, one of them's going to be president. But, like, I trust them not to be, like, that strange.
Yeah, man. Got some strange ones over the course of history. Plus, I think, our politics this cycle has clearly put pressure on the rest of the world to try to one-up us. Between Brexit and the guy in the Philippines,
Duterte
spouting off, and now South Korea. I mean, it's been a weird year.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, like, Francois Hollande is going to be like, Yeah, I'm gonna do whatever that. I'm gonna do the Tour de France like 8 times in a row while carrying an elephant, and we're just gonna be like, oh well, at least that's somewhat productive.
Yeah. I guess if there's any lesson here to be learned, don't elect the former dictator's daughter. Why would you do that?
Well, that seems like something like Nigeria would do,
Right.
not South Korea.
Yeah. We say as we sit on the precipice of potentially.
This is
True, very true.
None of us are in a glass house this year.
Well, I'm Canadian. I can.
God, that is brutally effective. There's no way to come back.
Yeah.
You guys are just so nice. Perfect.
This is what happens when you elect Trudeau. Anyway, that's my other story. Will come back to Trump because I thought I had another interesting perspective on that. But yeah, I just wanted to bring this up because I just found this to be so incredibly random, and I just didn't know how to respond to it.
Okay, that sounds pretty logical. Anyway, speaking of people saying and doing strange things, recently at the Illinois U.S. Senate debate between Tammy Duckworth and Mark Kirk, which I think is the first time an incumbent senator has trailed so significantly and constantly from his challenger. Like, I've never seen this before.
Right, and like and without any, like mortal political wounds, right? I mean, it's not like Kirk came into this cycle having passed a, transgender discrimination bill,
No, he's actually one of the more moderate Republicans in the Senate.
Right.
Which is really curious. Like, so for those of you who don't know, Mark Kirk won the special election to succeed President Obama in the U.S. Senate, and now it's the next regularly scheduled election, and Tammy Duckworth, who is an Iraq War veteran, is running against him, and also a congresswoman. And at the debate, she said, what her mother, I believe it is an Asian immigrant.
Yeah, she's
a Thai immigrant.
Yeah.
And then her father, his ancestors go all the way back to the Revolution.
Yep.
And that side of the family has had a long history of military service. And she brings that up at the debate, and then he goes something to the effect of, I didn't know that your ancestors came all the way here from Thailand to fight for George Washington.
That's literally what he said.
Yeah.
And it's like, I see, and this is where the whole moderate Republican things comes in. You're supposed to be the type of person that doesn't say stupid shit like that.
I didn't know we could swear. That's great.
Oh yeah. Well, we try to keep it to a minimum, but
well,
when we talk about outrageous stuff like this, like you just can't. At least I can't. Like, why? What are you doing? Like, why do you think that's clever? Why would you think that would? I want to know what his train of thought was. Why he thought that was a good idea. Does he have nothing to lose, or everything? I don't know.
My favorite part of that was when he says that, and then he's sitting there like waiting for I guess an applause line or a laugh or something from the crowd, and it's just dead. And then the moderator's like, moving on. Yeah, I guess I really thought okay, I'm not winning. I just got to throw stuff at the wall, and we'll see if any of these are good one-liners that change the way the race is running. And that was just not the line. That was not the one.
Well, here's the greatest part, right? When she was running for Congress, this is not the first time she's had a ridiculous remark thrown at her in politics.
That's true.
When she was running for Congress 4 years ago, she was running against John Walsh, who's now infamous for being a lunatic. And he criticized her for not standing up for the national anthem. Yeah, she's a double amputee. She can't stand up.
Oh, that's pretty bad.
And it's not like it's hidden, like her whole thing is that she served in Iraq, and in Iraq, I believe it was an IED blew off both of her legs. And like at all the events, she has like a pantsuit or something like that on, and then you can clearly see her mechanical legs. And I'm like, wait, what are you? I don't understand why these people think like they just let stuff come out of their mouth. And we think Trump is the only person that does that, but apparently not.
Well, we'll see. Next election cycle, you'll have 500, little Trumps trying to recreate his success, even if ultimately he loses the election. So, maybe Mark Kirk is just trying to get out of the gates, ahead of everybody else.
The Trumpite of the Year award.
Right.
Yeah. Aye.
It's like Profile in Courage, except Profile in Racism. Definitely not courageous.
No. Yeah. I don't even know, man.
Well, okay. I can bring up the polling for this, but last I checked, she's like 10 points ahead of him.
Yeah.
Which is unheard of for a Senate race for the incumbent to be 10 points down and this started like 3 months out. Like, it's not like this just happened yesterday. This just started yesterday. It's been like this for a while, which is pretty significant and pretty damning. I mean, similar thing going on in Wisconsin, one state over, with Ron Johnson and Russ Feingold, but it's not hard to imagine because Russ Feingold had that seat for many years, and now he's coming to take it back. But so I'm giving Tammy Duckworth more of an edge with this simply because she doesn't have nearly the same experience. Yeah, latest poll, which was conducted about a week or two ago, has Duckworth at 50, Kirk at 39.
Wow.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah. Go home, son.
2 weeks out.
I put on my gaming headphones.
Okay.
All right, cool. Thank you.
Because I'm 38 years old and I own gaming headphones.
Hey,
Hey,
man.
I don't actually, so you're ahead of me.
You're my core market when I'm done my program, so don't ever change.
Perfect. I don't intend to. To your point, though, Matt, I mean, I think he really messed up a couple of different ways, right? One was that it was bad comedy, right? So just from a comedic sensibility standpoint, it was insulting. And then everybody is hyper focused right now on race, and really any kind of disparaging of another group. And so for him to make something where everyone can attach the race conversation to it, I mean, man, if there was ever a year to not take a risk, even if it was, he intended it to be a joke, and I don't know whether he did or not, this is not the year to do it.
Nope.
Not at all. And see, because he's so moderate and tends to be more sensible, is what makes me think he didn't actually mean it and he was trying to be funny. But you're exactly right. Like, this is exactly the wrong election, the wrong time to be saying something like that.
Right.
It doesn't get you any favors. And I get it, yeah, I guess he has nothing to lose because he's going to lose. But if you want to be taken seriously after you leave office as a lobbyist or in the private sector, and you say something like that, a lot of people are not going to want to do business with you.
Yep.
That started to happen. We saw that sort of domino effect with the LGBTQ community, that as it became more and more accepted, fewer and fewer people wanted to do business with people and organizations and businesses that refused gay people service or were actively and openly discriminatory or hateful toward them. And when you bring up something like this, where race has been, being openly prejudiced and racist has been taboo for, 50 some odd years, so a lot longer, it seems very, very unintelligent to make a comment like that. But, I mean, you also, if it wasn't a spur of the moment thing and he was planning on saying something like that, I mean, any press is good press, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see.
All right.
Well, speaking of people getting crushed in Senate elections, real quick, I just wanted to bring up a great story that I saw in the Boston Globe. So Curt Schilling, as we may have discussed before, I don't know, he's a big fan of Donald Trump and not a big fan of Elizabeth Warren. So he has been threatening over the last few weeks to run against Elizabeth Warren when she's up for re-election in 2018. He even held a Trump rally at Boston City Hall about a week ago, which was attended by like 8 people. I kid you not, the Boston Globe had a picture of it.
I saw those pictures. Those were so great.
It was like a handful of people. It was very sad.
Somebody did that Twitter thing where they started with the first picture, that's pulled out, and then it gets progressively closer in on his face. Just the look on his face was priceless. He was furious.
He also had some sort of radio interview, which I believe we talked about, where he was angry that Jewish people vote for Democrats, which was an interesting take, considering that he doesn't seem like a guy who would like Jewish people very much. But so granted, this is 2 years out, but this poll, which I believe was conducted by Suffolk University, has with, again, 2 years out, but it's still a pretty good margin for only 2 years out. 58% for Elizabeth Warren, 24% for the former Red Sox hero, Curt Schilling.
Yeah, that's about, he's doing better than our boy Bernie was when he started out.
He is.
Yeah.
But the question is, can he make that up? I don't think he can.
No, he's no Bernie Sanders.
You get to where Bernie got by having an appealing message. Perhaps not a winning message, but an appealing message.
Right.
He doesn't have an appealing message. I think a lot of... And here's the thing. If he was like Tom Brady, right? Or if this was right after he finished his Red Sox career, and he said, yeah, I'll run for the U.S. Senate, I'll run for whatever, then I think those numbers would be a lot closer. Because people would still have this dreamy vision of him, of, baseball hero Curt Schilling. Or if Tom Brady ran for the U.S. Senate, football hero Tom Brady. But he's had time in between. And the time in between has not been kind to him. We've seen very clearly from his business failings in Rhode Island and elsewhere that we wouldn't want him elected dog catcher, let alone U.S. Senator. Sorry, Christian, you were going to say something?
I was going to bring up, he had a failed video game company.
Right.
Businessmen. Business. Good at business. But I do find it worth noting that I think he's one of these group of people who honestly thinks there's some silent majority that's actually really, really super racist and right-wing, and that's what they actually want. But they're getting drowned out by this left-wing minority. And I don't know. I just find that funny, because especially where he would be running too. That is definitely no. The people are legitimately actually left-wing, dude. No. So I don't know. I just find that disconnect, that alternate reality that a lot of people seem to put themselves in. It's funny, damaging to their political careers, and just funny to watch from the outside. Not that he really had a political career before this, but you know, you can sort of see how this hurt even Romney, who wasn't exactly entirely crazy, but he nonetheless put himself in this alternate mindset where the polls were wrong, and secretly there was this right-wing majority that was going to come out on election day and win him the election, and it didn't exist.
Well, and I think one thing that's been interesting to see over the years is, you know, Kurt, even though he was super opinionated when he was a player, wasn't really that political. And that doesn't mean he didn't hold political beliefs. He just didn't really talk about them publicly. But from the time he's retired to now, to see his evolution as kind of a public character, it's been pretty interesting. I mean, he has become significantly more conservative and kind of prone to these red meat moments than, you know, he ever was 5 years ago, which, you know, I think is probably true of that political faction in general. You know, I think the rhetoric has gotten a lot more heated over the course of the last, you know, 8 years, certainly. But he's not, you know, the same dude he was 5 years ago politically.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've actually been reading a book, and I feel bad because I can't remember the author's name, but he's a pretty well known. He's like the black guy on Fox News, who's left wing. What's his name? Clearly not that bad that I forget, because you guys don't know him either, so I feel less horrible. Nonetheless, he brought up some interesting points in his book that I hadn't really considered about how the demographics of the U.S. have really changed if you are someone who's baby boomer or slightly younger than that. I don't know what you call that. Is that Gen X?
That's that's right.
Yeah. If you're a Gen Xer, the U.S. has really the U.S. has really changed under your feet, and I feel like a lot of those people are beginning to realize that it already might be past the last election where they're an important voting coalition, because Barack Obama won, I think, with only 30-something% of the white male vote, but nonetheless he won two elections. So I think these people are perhaps Barack Obama made them aware of it, that they're not the most important voting coalition. The Democrats, or any party for that matter, can effectively win completely ignoring them, or, you know, only mildly mentioning them passingly. And I think there's some frustration there amongst that group of people, and it's coming out in the worst way possible. Not the worst way, I suppose, but a bad way.
Yeah, well, we are heading towards, you know, people always mention this, California already, I believe, and the country soon, in the next 10, 20 years, I believe, will become a majority-minority area, where the majority of the people that live in the country will be members of minority groups. They won't be white. So white people will still make up the plurality. They'll still be significantly more than any other group. But when you pit the demographics of white versus non-white, it's, you know, they've lost their majority. And for a lot of people, that seems really scary, not necessarily because they're racist or because they have these racist feelings, but just because that's an America that's changing. You know, my family's from Boston, and back in the day, not too long ago, Boston was mainly Irish and Italian. Now look at it; it's mainly black. That's a very big change right there. Now, obviously not, people don't necessarily have a problem with that per se, but it's still a very big change, especially in an area where you grow up, right? Because if you see, Matt, you know, because you're 30-something, you've lived in Sandwich for the vast majority of your life.
Yeah.
And I'm sure maybe not as significantly as Boston has, but you've seen some significant change. It looks very different than it was when you were a kid. And that can be welcome, and it can also be very alarming.
Yeah, and you know, our national history is chock full of kind of similar inflection points, you know, sort of similar moments where there are cultural shifts and there are folks that kind of line up on either side of that divide, like when those Irish and Italian immigrants first arrived, that they were very much the other, and their arrival and, exercise of economic and political power, I think similarly disquieted folks who had preferred things before the Irish and Italian showed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't think we were going to get this deep with this story. I was just going to make fun of Kurt Schilling, but okay.
hey, I will say to bring it back to that matchup, that I wouldn't sleep on Schilling, not because I think he's going to win, or that it might even necessarily be close, but I was just looking at the primary results, and even though the Mass Republican primary was late, Trump still got 50% of the vote. Cruz had another 10, so that's 60% of the Republican electorate, and I think there are lots of folks who are independents who would pull a lever for him, and I bet he'll be well funded because it'll be kind of a marquee race nationwide. Republicans run on Elizabeth Warren, and so to be able to fundraise off of trying to take her down, even if it's a pipe dream, they're going to be fired up.
Yeah, and that's something that really scares me, I think, a little bit more about where he'll go, because I kind of see, now that I think about it, I kind of see him as a sort of Matt Bevin-like character, where he runs for a seat, or, not to the same degree in ideology, but similar in action, kind of like Mitt Romney, where they both ran for the U.S. Senate knowing that they could not win. They could most definitely not win, but then they run for the governorship, and would you look at that? Suddenly, Matt Bevin's the governor of Kentucky, and Mitt Romney's the governor of Massachusetts, and just however many years ago we were mocking them for not having any political future. And I mean, hopefully the same thing won't happen with Kurt Schilling, but it could.
Right.
People laugh at him for running against Elizabeth Warren. He gets absolutely crushed. He does start, possibly a very, very uncomfortable rift in Massachusetts, and then when the next big seat comes up, whether it's the Senate or governor or even state representative, he nabs it and he wins, and we're like, oh, well, crap, that just happened.
Well, and I think the other big reason you see people running today who, aren't necessarily running to win, in addition to, getting their name out there politically for the next race, it's to cash in too, like that Schilling probably needs the money. And probably, might have a couple IOUs out there. So, he runs, he ups his profile, and then he's on Fox News. He's already he's on Breitbart Radio or something, right? And so,
yeah,
he's already making money off of even just thinking about running. So, yeah, I think a lot of people do that these days. He'll ghostwrite a book, and, then he's hawking reverse mortgages on TV, whatever it is.
Looking at you, Fred Thompson.
Right. Rest in peace.
And that's a very good point, because especially with these 17 Republicans that ran for the nomination this time around, did Rick Santorum or Mike Huckabee actually think they were going to win?
Right.
No. They were.
Right.
They knew they weren't going to win. They knew they had no chance, even without Donald Trump in the mix. But they did it because, exactly, they wanted to up their profile. They wanted to make some money off of it. They wanted to write a book.
Well, just look at Ben Carson, right? I mean, half of the primary season was actually his book tour. Like, actual book tour events, like off schedule, not campaigning, like nuts.
Yeah, exactly. That's I remember those stories, and I'm just like, what? You're especially when he was. I remember when he was ahead. when he was polling either even or ahead of Trump before the primary started, and there was a story that came out that he was going to take 2 weeks off to do his book tour, and I was like, "What? You're almost going to win." Like the primary, this was like a month before the primary started, and I'm like, this is the part where you campaign even harder to maintain your lead,
Right.
and you're going to take a vacation to go show people the different words that you were able to string together.
That's the moment when you can sell the very most books. You got to take advantage of that, coming over the crest of that wave, baby. Those books are going to sell themselves.
I guess so. Oh my God. Just why? Well, and I blame JFK for this. Because he wrote Profiles in Courage, and then every politician came out with a book.
Right.
Granted, Profiles in Courage was actually a good book. Just, oi. And I also blame capitalism, but that's a different story. Damn it, capitalism. All right. Christian, do you want to do your next story?
So let's get to this one. So Duterte was brought up earlier, but he said recently that, if you don't know, Duterte is the crazy Filipino president who's been very trying to basically break the 65-year U.S.-Filipino alliance. And he said America has lost, and that he's prepared to shift gears and realign himself with the Chinese ideological flow. So anyways, basically, what I want to get to through this is that the kind of strongman, not very democratic rhetoric from Trump is kind of what China and those kind of powers actively want to get from the U.S. At least that's what this article seems to be claiming, and it's something I've heard before. Because they want that proof that democracy doesn't work. And having Americans and the Philippines as well elect strongmen like this, and you see Russia actively funding right-wing parties in Europe to the same effect, is they want that proof, that this liberal democracy thing doesn't work, so they can turn to their own population and say, "Yo, this liberal democracy thing, it doesn't work." And I find it funny because you have a lot of these Trump supporters saying they want the U.S. to be stronger, especially back when it was Obama, when we're just dealing with Obama versus Romney, or just so on and so forth. They were saying, well, we want a stronger president than Obama, and I think that misses the point. You need in a liberal democracy, you don't want a strong man. You want someone who's not going to do things arbitrarily or just, have nice rhetoric, but have like an actual policy in place. Anyways, I'm sort of rambling. My point is, I found it interesting that this was actually something that in China, that apparently on state news, they've been very much playing Trump clips and saying, see, liberal democracy doesn't work. And it's interesting with that, knowing that apparently ISIS has released ads saying, see, this is what Americans actually think about Muslims. And my point is, that's just goes to show you words matter as much as we like to pretend they don't. Anyway, there you go. I saved it in the end. Saved my point in the end. I was rambling at first. I knew it. Anyways, that's what I was getting at.
Matt, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, to me that makes perfect sense, right? I mean, it's perfect propaganda for leadership that probably utilizes propaganda quite a bit as part of their arsenal. So other strongmen around the world would rather deal with strongmen, right? And if it has the added benefit of convincing the population that democracy is a defunct philosophy, then it makes a lot of sense why they try to capitalize off of it. And I think it's you see the mutually reinforcing nature of it with the whole kind of, for lack of a better word, alt-right rise in the last, 5-10 years. You see folks traveling to other countries, political leaders, attending rallies, supporting each other. And obviously all of what's going on between Trump and Russia, you can see that it's they're looking at each other's playbooks.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to earlier on in the Trump campaign, where people were pointing out that ISIS at times had used clips of Trump's ads in their recruitment videos, and that's I think the scary one of the scariest parts about Trump is that it's already worrisome enough if he gets elected, which he probably won't. But just the sheer fact that he has gotten this far, and that he has gotten this much press, and that he's so much out there, because as much as America dominates a lot of international news and a lot of the world in general, you don't get every story that America gets if you're living in another country, especially if you're in a situation where you don't get a lot of news from international waters. And of course, the greatest news is bad news. And the only thing you've seen probably for the past year and a half is Trump saying abhorrent stuff. And you think this guy represents America, or at least part of America. And especially if he gets elected, then he represents all of America because he's America's president. And, think about it, most people across the world who've seen this probably don't know that every living former president has denounced Trump, that more than half the country doesn't like him. They don't know that. All they know is what they're seeing either on the internet or on television, whatever media means they have, and most of it's going to be just him saying abhorrent stuff. And unfortunately, that's their view of America. I mean, granted, it's a bit of a different situation, but everything that Duterte says is the only thing I'm getting from the Philippines.
That's
so
true.
that doesn't make me feel very good about the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not representative of everybody in the Philippines, but that's all I get. All I get from Russia is what Putin says.
Yeah.
So, and that's really why I think we need to encourage, in whatever efforts that we do, we need to encourage understanding and, just negotiation, talk, friendly engagement with other countries, especially with our leaders, because they are our representatives to the rest of the world. And if the representatives to the rest of the world for our country are belligerent and rude and, don't mind calling presidents of other countries sons of bitches like Duterte did, or infringing on another country's sovereignty, or quite possibly someone who's threatened to build a 20-foot wall on another country's border. If we have leaders like that, that's going to very much deteriorate foreign policy and very much deteriorate exchanges of cultures and ideas across the world very quickly.
Yeah. It's actually interesting, this article, which, yes, I'm getting this from an article. It's from the Globe and Mail. It's Nathan Vanderclip wrote it. But he has an interesting quote here from a man from the European Council on Foreign Relations. An interesting thought, as I won't quote it word from word because it kind of gets messy because there's a lot of narration in between the thought. But basically he's saying there's a lack of understanding in the U.S. among, at least certainly, I guess you could say these group of people who support Trump who want the U.S. to be stronger. It produced that great quote in the 2012 election, actually, where Romney was going on about how the U.S. has become weaker, and then Obama mentioned that we also had horses and bayonets. So it's that there's this belief that power is somehow a measure of how many military assets you have on the board, and it's not about your ideas.
Ooh, that sounded super Canadian right there.
Well,
that was the first
I
to boot.
suppose.
That was the first to boot.
Okay.
Sorry.
You don't even know the half of it, Matt. But
that's awesome.
Anyways.
So you were saying.
Got me all crossed up. And he was saying, look, the U.S. won the Cold War not by actually beating Russia in a military bout. In the end, its ideas won. And the problem is with how the U.S. is this U.S. election is it's weakening its capacity, or certainly, I guess, even with just the rhetoric from the right in this election, is that it's to the world writ large, it's showing that American ideas aren't exactly as great as they were always drawn up to be. That whole concept of America being that shining beacon on the hill is kind of undermined when you got, one of your candidates running around saying he's going to ban all the Muslims from coming in the country. It's sort of hard to get the shining beacon on the hill when there's a giant wall around it and you can't see it. So I found that an interesting thought. And I think it's an important one to bring up, is the U.S. didn't win the Cold War because of the amount of battleships it had. In fact, it had none. It won the Cold War because at the end of the day, its ideas were better than Russia's. They appealed to the population of the Soviet Union more than the Soviet Union's ideas appealed to the population of the Western world, and it panned out in the end. And I think you have to work hard to ensure, because I think that's how you ultimately, if you want to beat China in Asia, I guess you don't want to beat China necessarily. You want to beat the Communist Party, I suppose. That's a better way of putting it. You have to prove your ideas are better to the Chinese people. You can't just scare them into submission. That's just not going to work at all. Anyway.
Matt, you were going to say something, I believe?
Well, I was thinking that, there are a lot of factors that have created this political moment we're in. And, I think a huge one is the, kind of global moment. But, a ton of how we got to where we are is self-inflicted. The sort of political culture that we've created or allowed to be created over the last, maybe 40 years is just become, increasingly toxic and kind of, increasingly unstable and unsustainable. That all of those factors aren't necessarily going to change on November 9th. And, in a lot of ways they could get worse. So, I'm kind of bearish about what comes, after this election cycle in terms of, our ability to start functioning as a republic.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because it makes this election all the more depressing. Like, we've had some very passionate elections before, but once it's over, it's over. That's it. Whoever won. You can't really argue anymore. Even with the recount in 2000, Al Gore bowed out gracefully, and his supporters did more or less. But it, and a great point to that has always been that the great thing about American democracy is that there's never any tanks in the streets. And there's a peaceful transition of power. I don't know if that's going to happen, because already a lot of people are saying that if Hillary's elected, they're going to try to assassinate her. And of course, there was plenty of talk of that when Obama was running, but it was, typically very radical racist groups that people already didn't care about or like, so they were still on the fringe. you didn't hear the majority of Tea Partiers, I'd say, saying they wanted to kill Obama. But it seems that you're getting towards the majority of people who support Trump, who are going to vote for Trump, who have voted for Trump, that they want Hillary Clinton dead. And that's very tremendously scary that we can't have that peaceful transition of power. We're most likely not going to have maybe not in terms of gun violence, but at least civil unrest. There will be a lot of civil unrest.
Well, and I think what we're probably witnessing is the breakdown of core institutions. Sort of as Justice Thomas was talking about, that you're now seeing what went from kind of a sideshow in politics to center stage. And I think part of the self-segregating that we've done as a society, sort of gone to our corners, on the right and left, and stopped really talking to each other a lot. Part of that process, I think, is that it escalates by its nature, because in order to come to prominence, whether it's as a politician or a syndicated talk show host or a blogger or somebody on Fox News, you make your mark by being more incendiary than the person before you. And so, to me, the scariest part is that it seems like the logical next step, or, logical in the sense of, what's most likely to come next is some actual violence. You sort of see the history of, right before the Civil War, where there were these little skirmishes, a little riot here, a little, raid there, people, getting physically violent on the floor of the Senate, right? So, that to me would not be, it would be absolutely devastating, but it wouldn't be surprising.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it hopefully probably won't escalate to something like that, but I mean, you're pretty right. I mean, leading up and going through the civil rights era, there was plenty of violence. Luckily, there was no, war, or at least official declaration of war between anybody or anything, but it was definitely not one of the more peaceful times in our history. I think that's pretty easy to say. So, yeah, I mean, it does seem to be a sort of cycle that happens. It's something, I guess, that comes with being a country that is not homogeneous, that is very, very diverse. And, I'm not saying that we can't heal from that and we can't get to sort of more kumbaya-esque society. I think we definitely can get closer to that if we work for it. But yeah, this is going to get worse before it gets better. And I hope it gets better, and I hope it gets better soon. I'd rather not be going to college and having riots down the street from me every day, but you never know, unfortunately. And this is really the message behind my whole catchphrase at the end of every video and every podcast, which is have malice toward none, because you really don't live a good life if you have this pent-up rage against people who against people who disagree with you, people who look differently from you, people who talk differently from you. Doesn't matter, just any difference that they have from you, and you have this rage about it. It's not a healthy way to live. And the only way we can defeat that sort of culture is by
America British again.
Having the Queen take over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, that would probably unite us faster than people think.
That's true. The British are coming. Time to put everything aside and stop that.
That's literally the plot of an ad for the Royals on FX, which I've never watched and never will watch. But they offer to take us back because we've messed it up so badly.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, yeah. I guess the message of this show, everybody, is to try to be more understanding, try to be more level-headed, and just don't shoot a presidential candidate if you happen to not like them very much. So yeah, any parting words, anybody?
No, not really. I guess I'm feeling empty. I'm feeling dead air. Let's be honest.
You do that most of the time. No.
I would I have to thank you guys for having me on. I had a blast. This was really fun. I'd like to do this again.
Thank you very much for joining us, Matt. I know we kind of ended on a downer note, but hey, that's politics.
Right.
Hopefully we'll have something better to talk about. Hopefully something more happy next time you're on. Maybe we'll have a cat video at the end. I don't know.
We'll see. Yeah. Hey, if the news is still as grim, then we'll have cat videos to make up for it.
Yay, distractions.
Yeah. It's fine. We will fiddle. We will fiddle while Rome burns, baby.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, of course, Matt, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
And I hope you all have a lovely Sunday night, a lovely Halloween. Definitely the best mood on this show for Halloween coming up. So happy Halloween, everybody. And as always, have malice toward none.